everyone's sick of this coronavirus thing, but the debate has shifted in two directions in a week. One, of course, the astronomical cost of all this to the nation, and we will continue to address that. But we're now being told about a suicide rate possibly increasing by 50% because of all of this. 1,500 additional suicide deaths. Then, of course, you've got the trauma of drought and bushfires on top of all of that. Experts, though they don't have high credibility with me at the moment, experts say that suicide rates could rise by up to 50% due to the economic and social impacts of coronavirus. And listen to this. They're saying suicide will outstrip deaths from the pandemic by a factor of 4. That is, 4 times more people will die from suicide than from coronavirus. Pre-coronavirus, just supposing this, someone's on $90,000 a year. Not a lot of money today, $1,800 a week. The business is told to close down. Part of the lockdown has to do as it's told. The owner says, that's it for me, I won't be back. So the bloke on $1,800 a week is down to $550. What do? No wonder this is called the silent epidemic. Youth suicides are forecast to make up almost half the increase. And there's also talk of a generational mental health crisis linked directly to the pandemic. We're now told the federal government wants to lift mental health to a tier 1 issue, and the government has appointed a deputy chief medical officer devoted to the issue of mental illness. Well, from across the ditch, a free new mental wellness app has been launched to help people in these troubled times. It's called Mentemia, which is Italian for my mind. One of the creators of the app is a bloke whose own battles with mental illness have been well documented, but this is the sobering point to remind us all that mental illness does not discriminate. This man was in his day the greatest rugby union winger in the world, the All Black John Kirwan. I know. My teams played against him. He knew no fear. He's now Sir John Kirwan for the work he's done in this and other fields. Sir John Kirwan played 63 tests for New Zealand. He scored a try in every second test, 35 of them. He's the founder of the Sir John Kirwan Foundation, whose aim is to equip students, young people, with the knowledge and the tools to safeguard and nurture their own mental well-being and help others do the same. He's released the Mentemia app. All the details are on the website. Simple. Mentemia. Mums and dads, write it down. mentemia.com. Mentemia.com. And Sir John Kirwan joins us via Skype from New Zealand. Now, I'm a bit confused here with you. I mean, do I have to call you Sir John?
No.
He was. He was.
I should be calling you Sir.
I've got to tell you a lovely story, because in our big clashes with the Wallabies and the All Blacks, John was on the left wing for the All Blacks, and he was fearsome. So I had a young fellow, Matthew Burke. He was only 19 years of age, and I said, and he was terrified about defending against John Kirwan. I said, now listen, Matty, just remember one thing. When John Kirwan gets the ball, make sure he gets you as well, but don't be worried if he gets you first. The referee will blow the whistle, late tackle, but it'll be worth it. So we tried to terrorise the great Kirwan. They were good days, John, weren't they?
Oh, they were fantastic days, and I was probably the happiest I'd been in a long time when Matt Burke went to rugby league. And often I talk about Matt Burke, and he gets confused for the fullback, who was also a great player. But Matt Burke was one of the toughest guys I ever marked. So I was pretty happy when he went. I think he went to East back then, didn't he, Alan? I think he went to East Rugby League. I was pretty happy.
Yeah, here we go. Don't let them score. There he is. Have a look at this. Have a look at this. Have a look at this. This is the great Kirwan. Look, and he was quick too. There he is. Well, now, what is less well known is during this remarkable rugby career, John Kirwan was silently battling depression. I read one article that spoke about, quote, anxiety attacks as your, quote, unquote, dark companion for a number of years. Do you remember when the attacks started and what initially triggered them?
Yeah, I think they probably started when I was 13 or 14, but I really didn't take too much notice of them. I used to just put them in a little compartment in my head. And then probably when I started making the Auckland team, 18, 19, they really started coming back. What used to happen with the anxiety is they'd come and it's like just this raw fear. And I'm like, I remember one day I sat in my car after a radio interview, and it was like being in a sardine can. And my anxieties back then were these thoughts that I was scared I was going to execute. So this one, I was scared I was going to drive off the Harbour Bridge. And I remember just going into a cold sweat and just sitting there, and I was paralysed for like 20 minutes. And I finally got home and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I felt okay. And so what I did is I just ignored them, and they just kept coming. You know, I had them during test matches, I had them post-test matches. And then, as often can happen, it fell into a full depression. So,
see, John, you know, this is the invisible. This is what we're talking to John Kirwan. It's the invisible illness. In August 1991, you said the depression hit ground zero. You'd been on tour with the All Blacks to Argentina, and when you returned home, in your words, you said you fell apart. And I read an article that said he became a prisoner of his darkest thoughts. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't get out of bed, trapped, shaking, sweating and crying. It was the only time he ever missed a game. That was rough stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, I wanted to jump out of a window in Argentina. I was obviously hiding my mental health from the team. I was on an All Black tour, and you've probably been to the Hilton in Buenos Aires, Alan, and I was on the 10th floor, wanted to jump out of the window, and Michael Jones said to me, "JK, you've got a good heart." And that saved me. That saved my life that night. And I got myself home and finally reached out and got some help. And really, you know, I don't like the word journey, but I started to go on this journey of actually understanding what mental health, and you'll understand this. I mean, you coached. Here was a person like me. You know, I was going to the physio 3 times a week. I was taking anti-inflammatories to play, and yet I would not take any notice of my mental fitness. It was all about physical fitness, and I was just a complete wreck. And finally, I reached out and got help, and sort of started, you know, the journey of getting back to how I feel today, which is thriving.
John, for how long did you hide it? Because many people are frightened to talk about it. Did anyone around you, your family, your teammates, you mentioned Michael Jones, what a great player, did they know what was going on?
No, I mean, that's the whole thing. You know, I could hide it. I could fake it. People didn't know. And I think when you talked about it being a hidden illness, you did right. I mean, you talked before about pandemics. I mean, 800,000 people committed suicide last year around the world. You know, that's also a pandemic. So it's hidden, and that's the problem. If I walked into a room and I saw you next week and I was limping, you'd say, "JK, what's up with your knee?" But I could walk into those rooms and I could fake it. And that's part of the problem, because it can be invisible. And the secret for me was someone told me it was an illness. I thought it was a weakness. Someone told me it was an illness. And, you know, I think the most important thing for people out there to realise is that, you know, some people are born with mental health conditions, and, you know, that's a little bit like what I call type 1 diabetes, and there should be a whole lot of research and money going into that. But there is a whole lot of just normal people that are suffering from anxiety and stress that's pushing them towards the cliff.
Well, JK, let's just go to Peta, because she, at a very personal level, I know, has been through this very recently. Peta?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, my girlfriend lost her 16-year-old son to suicide a month ago. It's taken them a month to be able to bury the beautiful boy Louis today, buried him today in Geelong because of all the restrictions on funerals. And it comes as a spate of suicides in that area, and it's heartbreaking, right? And today, on the online funeral, as we do now because of restrictions, there were over 900 people there. And I think this kid probably thought he didn't have anybody there. Now, his mum and dad, she's a former police officer, so engaged, would talk about these issues, very open, but still he took his life. What can you tell parents? I mean, they thought they were looking at all the right signs, but clearly, you know, sometimes the most engaged parents can still be beaten by this affliction. What do we tell our young people?
I think the most important thing is to keep trying to engage. I think the hardest thing about this invisible illness is it takes away your self-esteem, takes away your self-confidence, and it takes away your enjoyment in life. You feel isolated even though you could have a room of people around you. And so I think the most important thing is just education. You know, it's an illness, not a weakness. But like I said to you, it doesn't matter what people would say. I felt like I was weak and poor and isolated. I felt I couldn't talk to people. And I think the hardest thing about suicide, and this is, you know, my prayers go out to that family, it leaves so much more grief than normal death behind. And, you know, it can leave anger, it can leave, you know, devastation, questions, what more could I have done? But I think the most important thing to think about is that young man, you know, he died of an illness. And, you know, we've got to grieve and celebrate his life because it's unbelievably bad. Unbelievably bad to get it. But I'd just like to say to the parents, you know, it's not their fault. It's no one's fault. It's an illness.
Good on you, JK. JK, hey, listen, you did wonderful things, JK, on the paddock, but I'll tell you what, this is your finest hour, the contribution you're making because of your status, because of your greatness as an athlete. People start to understand exactly what you're saying. This is non-discriminatory. We'll talk again, John. We'll catch up somewhere, I'm sure, at Eden Park or wherever else. It's lovely to make contact again, albeit these circumstances, but we're deeply in your debt. There he is, Sir John Kirwan. Now, the new app is called Mentemia, which is Italian for My Mind. The website is Mentemia, mentemia.com, mentemia.com. And just note that number that's been across the screen here for Lifeline. There's always someone there who's prepared to talk to you. Mentemia.com, Mentemia, Mentemia.com, Lifeline 13 11 14.